like to call upon Ms. Joni Teves, Chief Precious Metal Strategist, UBS Investment Bank, to provide us the summary of the conference. As I invite her, a quick introduction about Ms. Joni Teves, Chief Precious Metal Strategist, UBS Investment Bank. Joni Teves is the Precious Metal Strategist within the UBS Economic and Strategy Research team, and she is based in Singapore. She covers all the 4 precious metals, and she is responsible for fundamental analysis, forecasting, and writing research pieces on these markets. With this introduction, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Ms. Joni Teves.
So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the SBMA for such a great conference, and to all the delegates who have made it the past few days such an enriching and fruitful experience for everyone. Before diving into my attempts to summarize each of the sessions, I wanted to start with a few general comments on themes that I've picked up over the course of the conference. One, it was striking to me that the physical gold market has really stood out this year, with reports of strong buying across local markets, long queues despite high premiums on gold in local currency terms. I think it is important to kind of note how strong physical demand has been, particularly in the region, and I think it puts into a lot of context the price moves that we've seen this year. It also highlights the importance of physical demand to the global gold market. The second key point is that in Asia, consumers bought gold even at the highs because this was an attractive alternative investment to onshore assets, and it was seen as a way to preserve wealth and protect against inflation, protect against currency weakness and economic uncertainty. And this was a theme across many different countries in the region as well. The third point that I noticed is that gold seems to be adapting and exerting its relevance to the next generation, with comments about how the younger generation is opening up to gold, be it in jewelry terms or investment terms. And I think this is a credit to the efforts of the industry to also adapt to this new younger audience. I thought this was good because I was starting to think I was getting old by wanting to start buying gold jewelry. So, it does make me feel that I'm still in with the young kids. And then finally, the point that I wanted to make is that no matter how much the schedule ran over or how tight the schedule has been, there's always time for photos. So that has been a key theme throughout this conference as well. Okay, so yesterday was technically the start of the second day of the conference, although many had already had a full day on Sunday going to back-to-back cocktail receptions. So congratulations to everyone who made it for the first session yesterday and the official opening session. But most importantly, congratulations to the SBMA for celebrating its 30-year anniversary and celebrating 30 years of working towards growth in the precious metals industry in the region, and looking ahead to the next phase of unifying the Asia-Pacific bullion market with Singapore at its core. I thought this was a really key thread or key theme during this entire session, starting with Mr. K.L. Yap's welcome address to Mr. Ivan Tan's speech, which highlighted how far we have come as an industry in this region and how important this conference has become. The things that stood out to me, it was highlighted that there have been more than 500 participants to this conference this year from more than 20 countries. There have been numerous networking opportunities across many different corporate events this week. I do wonder how many bottles of wine and cups of coffee were also drank during this period, and whether or not the APPMC has competed with the impact on Singapore's economy that Taylor Swift had earlier in the year when she had her concerts here. Then we had Mr. David Tate sort of further highlight the potential for Singapore as a regional hub and how the World Gold Council supports these initiatives and shares in this vision. He highlighted the characteristics of Singapore that make it ideal to this role. And then David's discussion on digitalization of gold and the GBI database tied in nicely with the next speech from Ms. Ruth Kroll, which focused on gold bar integrity program and how the LBMA has been working together with partners in the region towards getting to a place where kilobars are readily acceptable in London. The ultimate goal being that we eventually have a transparent digital ecosystem. After thanking the sponsors and lots more photos being taken, we moved on to the first keynote speech address by Mr. Jin Tik Ngai, who took us through the economic outlook for the US and the ASEAN. I think the key points here was that they were expecting that, or they were highlighting that the US economy has been holding up and going through the reasons why the economy has been holding up, and that they expect one rate cut this year in November. And this is down from initially expecting 3 cuts. What this means for EM Asia is that the resilience of US capex should mean that trade with Asia holds up, and this should mean that we can see an EM Asia FX rebound later in the year. There is a divergence, though, between those that are exposed to the tech cycle. So outperformance is expected from the Korean won, the Taiwanese dollar, while others like the Japanese yen and the Thai baht are lagging behind. There was also a discussion on sort of the fair value of gold and what drives the price of gold. And based on their model, they had about $800 for the gold price given current conditions. But that means that currently gold is trading at a huge premium, and a lot of this is likely because of central bank buying, and how this is a structural trend that is likely to continue. So JP Morgan had a target for the year end of $2,500, and they highlight that gold does continue to rally after the Fed cuts rates. The second keynote speech we had yesterday was from Mr. Xiao Kai-fan, who drew parallels with the F1 Grand Prix by saying that Singapore is in pole position. Now, I had to look up what that meant because I'm not a racing person. So just to share quickly, it means that it is the most favorable place for a car to start the race in, situated in the inside of the front row. It is a place that has to be earned, with a top spot going to the driver with the fastest qualifying time. So it was high praise for Singapore to be called in pole position. And Xiao Kai noted that Singapore has the potential to become a vaulting location for central banks in the region, given its proximity, political stability, reputation of trustworthiness, and strength in logistics. This, in turn, can enhance liquidity. This keynote address was then followed by the inauguration of the SBMA Retail Investment Committee with Mr. Gregor Gregerson as chairman of the Singapore chapter, the first one being rolled out in Asia. Then we had a special address from Mr. Cheng Dong Zhang on observations of the gold market in Hong Kong and mainland China. He noted that demand for gold products keeps increasing, especially in retail. And this year, there was particularly strong growth during the Chinese New Year for gold and silver products. We then had the ASEAN Precious Metals Update Session, which was chaired by Mr. Albert Cheng. And we got a lot of updates from Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and Laos. And just some key highlights from that session for me. It stood out that gold bars in Vietnam were selling at the equivalent of $3,020 per ounce. Such a huge premium versus the global spot price. But even then, demand has remained quite strong in Vietnam. There are policy changes there to be expected ahead, such as the liberalization of the market, the creation of a gold exchange patterned after the SGE. So that's something that we can look forward to in Vietnam. In Malaysia, what struck me is the trend towards more online purchases that has been ongoing in recent years, and also the shift towards gold jewelry away from genset, so even more concentrated, accounting for 90% of the market from 80% previously. Tax on high-value goods can be a challenge in Malaysia, but there are also opportunities such as the potential for withdrawals from the Employment Provident Fund and also the 13% pay rise to government employees. So I wish I had that kind of pay rise. In Thailand, we had Mr. Golf Herunyasiri, who noted that it was the first time that he actually saw consumers buying instead of selling as gold prices rallied to new highs. And he was the one who noted that there were queues outside of stores to buy gold when there were headlines coming out that could potentially push the prices of gold higher. And in Laos, it was a description from Ms. Sunanavong, who gave us an overview of a very young gold market in Laos, but very eager to learn from peers in the region and develop further from here. The short-term goal being to open and build a bullion bank. The second session was chaired by Mr. Roland Wang, and basically was talking about China's gold market and how it can work together with the ASEAN market, talking about the old Silk Road that took trade from China to the Middle East, and now the new Silk Road would be to trade with the ASEAN market. Maybe we should start calling it the yellow brick road from China to Southeast Asia. The key takeaway for me from this session was that there was definitely several invitations to visit factories in China to see how jewelry is made and maybe do some shopping onshore and also online. So for any of you who are interested, get in touch with the speakers during this session. It started with a discussion on insights into jewelry manufacturing and how machine-produced jewelry is actually a lot faster than handmade jewelry and very little defect rates. And then Mr. Stephen Zhou talked about selling online via B2B, live streaming, and digitalization of products being sold both online and offline. Then we had Mr. Sun Song He discussing how he has differentiated his business by focusing more on a targeted market, women in their 30s, which includes me. I can pretend. And he walked us through the importance of really understanding the customer, their tastes, preferences, and using technology once again to really help support the business. And then we had Mr. Mark Yang, who highlighted that there is a common thread between gold and hot pot, the Haidilao hot pot, and this is financial institutions that sit in the middle that basically help bridge the gap between kind of companies in China kind of opening out into the ASEAN market. Then we had this session with Mr. Jordan Eliseo, who provided a discussion on Australia's role in shaping the APAC precious metals market. So he highlighted that Australia's regulatory framework is supportive, and there's quality sourcing, and there are advantages in logistics given the time zone and the ease of moving material from Australia into this region. What was really interesting that he mentioned to me was that in the past it was always said that Asia is at Australia's doorstep, but that has now moved into the living room. So Asia is in the living room of Australia, with 30% of the population born overseas. Some more interesting statistics that stood out from his speech was how currently gold ETFs versus all types of ETF assets are actually around 1% versus 8% during the peak. So there's still a lot of growth potential. And in Australia specifically, that's currently about 2.5%. Following on from this, the third session was an update on Japan, Korea, and Australia, and this was shared by Mr. Kazuya Naoki. And it started off with an update from Mr. Bruce Ikemizu on Japan, and a key point for me is how gold in Japanese yen has actually been the strongest performing asset so far this year. And Bruce noted that this is on the back of a weaker yen, and a move away from prolonged period of deflation that has changed sort of the investment mindset of customers in Japan. And it's interesting that he also notes that a younger audience has been more active in the gold space since COVID. Moving to Korea, the land of BTS, K-pop, and K-drama, we also had sort of a discussion on the history of the gold market in Korea, and Mr. Jung gave us, a brief backdrop of, the removal of the GST and then the revamp of the GST, and the current efforts to resolve issues, and we are left with a cliffhanger of what's the next episodes that are going to come from Korea's gold and silver market. So in Korea, it was interesting to note that 75% of gold demand is in jewelry and 25% is industrial. So it doesn't really show a lot of, it doesn't seem that there's an specific investment demand for gold in Korea. Then Mr. Cameron Alexander then provided a further update on the Australian market, but more from a supply and demand perspective. Australia does account for about 8% of global supply, and the expectation is that mine supply is going to be relatively stable going forward, given there are newer mines coming on stream, and there have been sort of an increase in exploration spending. On the demand side, there seems to be an even split in Australia between jewelry and investment demand for gold. And the sharp rally in the gold price has dampened demand for gold in Australia compared to other markets in Asia. Key learnings from this session: Korea and Japan tend to be net exporters of gold, but this could be somewhat shifting in Japan given the changes in demand. Most of the gold that's coming out, and particularly out of Australia, is headed for China via Hong Kong and Singapore, and London is ultimately the destination of last resort when demand in the region is weak. The metal ends up in London. Taxes can be a challenge, as mentioned earlier, in Korea, which has an impact on demand. And there seems to be, and it was mentioned during this session, that there seems to be a need to increase brand awareness for gold bars for Japanese and Korean brands within Southeast Asia. Because currently there's a preference for Swiss branded bars, or the perception that these come at a premium. So once we start getting competition from Japanese and Korean bars, my colleagues will be slightly having to do a bit more work. Session 4 then kicked off with a fireside chat with representatives from the women in PGMs, chaired by Ms. Zuing Jing. This was, I think, a very important session for me personally, especially given the efforts of women in PGMs to increase the participation of women within our industry. And I do have I wanted to highlight my favorite quote from Madeleine Albright, the former US Secretary of State, wherein she says that there should be a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. So it's very good to have this session highlighting the work that the women in PGMs is doing. We heard from the PGI, Ms. Zhenzhen Liu, on platinum jewelry. and how consumers of platinum jewelry actually care about ESG factors. And then we heard from Ms. Kate Harada, who talked about efforts towards diversity and inclusion within Tanaka. And then to round up that session, Ms. Zuying had sort of a summary of the efforts on mentoring from the women in PGM. So if anyone is interested, please make sure to reach out to the team. Then we had the session on PGMs created by the World Platinum Investment Council. It started with a speech from Mr. Dominic Wood, opening with thoughts on creating a future for PGMs. He did address the elephant in the room about the merging Anglo's platinum businesses, but he noted that this will allow the right resources to be deployed and for these assets to be further developed. He noted that the future of demand is anchored on being able to scale existing demand for PGMs such as hydrogen, jewelry, investment, and be able to also create new demand segments such as carbon neutral feedstock, food tech, battery storage. Mr. Trevor Raymond then took us through the investment case for platinum and how it is currently a compelling argument to hold to hold platinum as part of your portfolio. And he said that platinum could actually benefit from people taking profit on their gold positions. He described what platinum is, that it is a rare precious metal that is 20 times less available than gold, and that they expect strong demand going forward and deficits for the next 5 years. He mentioned the upcoming Shanghai Platinum Week, and I was very surprised actually of the attendance statistics that he mentioned for the previous one, which is over 1,200 attendees and 180,000 live streaming views. So I don't know if that's something that the SBMA conference wants to aim for. And then there was a panel discussion that followed. Basically, one key takeaway for me from this session is that platinum and PGM shouldn't be really considered as white metals. They should be colorful metals in the fact that they are used across many different aspects of our lives. And I guess it kind of makes sense because white is the presence of all colors. It's not really a color in itself. And they were, the people on the panel were wearing colorful ties to represent that. And maybe next year we can get colorful suits to have, the full commitment to the theme. So that takes us to today. A bit more difficult to take notes today after the gala dinner yesterday and 2 days of the conference already. But I tried my best. So we started the session early with a speech from Mike DiRenzo on silver, which is the indispensable metal, according to him. Silver is often overshadowed by gold, but there's a lot of beauty in silver. It has a long history of use. It's used in industry and health, and there's definitely a lot of applications for silver. He noted that there's been tremendous growth in solar and electric vehicle usage of silver, and that they expect this growth to continue. Then we had the fifth session, which was an update from the Middle East and India gold markets, chaired by Mr. Amar Singh. So some key highlights from this theme, from my perspective. Firstly, Dubai has been a hub for supply, particularly into India, especially with SEPA as the gateway. But also, the Middle East actually slowly expanding this as well, beyond just India. Government support has been crucial in these efforts, particularly focusing on regulations, responsible sourcing, anti-money laundering efforts. And basically, this has allowed a friendlier landscape and increasing the role of UAE, which is important given the growth of gold demand in the region, and also given its location globally, allowing, as a good hub to move metal across different regions. India is a big consumer of gold, which has grown from about 400 tons to currently 600 to 900 tons. And with the introduction of the IIBX, they've now seen 13 tons of gold trading so far this year, and 1 million kilograms of silver trading. Something to look forward to as well within this in India is the expansion of the role of Indian banks, now that they're allowed to participate on the IIBX and play a larger role in trading and in derivatives particularly as well, providing opportunities for players onshore to hedge price risks. Then we had the sixth session, which was firstly a fireside chat on technology and innovations in gold between Mr. Martin Huxley, Ms. Rich Teo, and Mr. Gregor Gregerson. And this was a challenging discussion for me because I'm not a very techie person, so I didn't understand a lot of the terms that they used. But basically, it was a discussion on the tokenization of gold, and how the success of tokenization really depends on regulation, but also depends on how the industry embraces all of those regulators and how the industry decides on what standards to accept when moving gold around that's backing these tokens. A big challenge for this is the demand for gold tokens is actually quite low given the cost of holding gold versus other products in this space, particularly given also the existence of US dollar tokens. I think a key for the growth within this is if we get harmonization of accepted gold bar standards across different markets, which would help gold become more fungible, traceability systems, and the willingness to see tokenized allocated gold in the same way as you would see allocated gold, and also the willingness to use tokenized gold as collateral. There is hope that this can be done easier and be easier to adopt within Asia. The second fireside chat during the sixth session was on gold sustainability impacts and goals, both local and global responses. This was chaired by Mr. John Mulligan, and we had Mr. Peter Boer, Mr. Dedo Liang, and Mr. Albert Chang. So they were talking a lot about ESG. We were walked through sort of an example of how to put together the ESG strategy step by step, coming up with an ESG map, and really embedding ESG to the core of the business. There was conversations around, this could either be driven by government pull or customer pull. Either way, it is something that needs to be done. And the gold space actually has shown good leadership within this. And what is special about the gold value chain is, there is a strong role coming from the gold miners for themselves to decarbonize, but also incentives along the full value chain for everyone within that to also decarbonize. And we still have a long way to go with regards to this. There was an award then followed for the people that forecasted gold and silver London prices for yesterday. So congratulations to those who won. I hope you got your prizes. And then that takes us to the last and final session, which is chaired by Ms. Nikki Shields. It was just right now. It was a very good session. I'm not going to summarize that because you were all just here for that. But it did sound like the panel was bullish on gold, but not as bullish to expect prices to reach $3,000 within the next 12 months. So I would say realistically or practically bullish, not overly bullish. I will stop there. Thank you for your attention and your patience.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. Thank you.